Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and today I'll be reviewing the Xbox One Elite wireless controller. This is a premium controller from Microsoft intended for pro gamers and those that play competitive multiplayer games. There are a few ways that the Elite controller differentiates itself from the standard controller. The first of which are the interchangeable parts. Within the included hard plastic case, you'll find 2 additional sets of analog sticks, another D-pad, and paddles. All of these components attach to the controller magnetically. They easily come off when you intend to swap them out, but the magnets are still strong enough that everything will stay on while you're playing. The first set of analog sticks are the standard short concave ones that all Xbox players will be familiar with. The additional ones are essentially tall and medium heights, and the medium ones have rounded tops. So the taller a control stick is, the more your thumb is required to move to get an equivalent movement that you would see from a shorter stick. This means that a taller stick can be more accurate while playing a first-person shooter, for example. The Elite controller comes with a regular shaped D-pad and this odd bowl-shaped one. I don't play fighting games myself, but that's where this would be most helpful. Doing your quarter circles and half circles would theoretically be easier with this special D-pad, as your thumb can just roll around in it. Around the back of the controller, you'll find switches for the triggers. When they're flipped down, a mechanical stopper moves up into the trigger, and that stops the trigger from moving once it's reached its activation point. And that essentially makes them digital inputs. And is great for when you're playing a first-person shooter, so your trigger doesn't have that extra movement and you can get your shots off that fraction of a second quicker. But keep in mind that this will affect anything that requires an analog input. For example, for the first few days when I was playing Halo 5, I thought the boost on the Ghost had been significantly slowed down until I realized it was dependent on that analog input. Something many will likely be unfamiliar with on the back are the paddles. There are 4 of them, 2 short and 2 long, and they kind of hook into these slots and are held in place with magnets. And any paddle can go into any slot. The slots are given the designations P1 through P4, and each one can be programmed to duplicate any digital input on the controller. To do this, you'll use an app called Xbox Accessories. Within this app, users of the Elite controller can remap any of the digital buttons on the controller, essentially everything except the analog sticks. Mapping the face buttons to the paddles is extremely helpful in shooters, for examples, because then you never have to take your thumbs off of the sticks. Or if a button layout in the game isn't quite to your liking, you can make it better. Or if you're a crazy person, you can do things like adjust the response for the movement of the analog sticks within the app. All of these settings are stored locally on the controller. And in fact, there is a slot on the front of the controller, position 1 and position 2, where you can set up your game settings to these slots and then quickly swap between them. So if you can have multiple controller layouts for a single game, or if you're switching to other games frequently, you can swap between those controller layouts. For me personally, I have a setting for Halo on one, and the second one is dedicated to Forza. So on my Halo settings, I've got movement on the back paddles, and for my Forza layout, I've got, of course, shift up and shift down on the paddles. It's no substitute for a full racing wheel setup, but for someone without the means to buy a high-end racing wheel, and nor do I have the room for one, it's pretty cool to have that. Overall, the Elite controller is exceptionally well made. The front is a matte finished plastic, the back has textured grippy materials, the face buttons feel snappier, and also the analog sticks, D-pad, and triggers are made out of steel. I've personally already gone through 2 standard Xbox One controllers since it launched. On my first one, one of the analog sticks started to drift, and on the one that I got to replace that had a loose panel on the backing. So suffice it to say, the build quality of a standard Xbox One controller isn't that great, even when compared to something like the Xbox 360 controller. This quality comes at a price, however, as the Elite controller is $150. That's 2.5 times the price of a standard controller at $60. Now again, given the lack of quality on a standard controller, I'd say that if you're spending, say, a dozen hours a week playing Xbox games, especially if those are competitive multiplayer games, I would say that the Xbox One Elite controller is worth that price. But if you're more casual, then I would definitely wait to see if it comes down in price. So that's it, my review of the Xbox One Elite wireless controller from Microsoft. It's a phenomenal controller, but a pricey one as well. I'm Daniel, DFalcon304 on YouTube. Thanks for watching.